Hello, everyone, and welcome to another casual stroll through Lord of the Rings Online. My name is Matt Elliott. I'm a senior world designer here on Lord of the Rings Online, and today we are continuing our series of streams through the roads of Middle-earth. The first of the series that we did, we kind of went west to east, starting in Ered Luin and ending all the way over in the Iron Hills. The second stream, we went from Foreshell all the way here to where you see right now in Isengard. And now we're going to continue our travels through the roads, where we're going to leave Isengard, head south in through Rohan, and eventually getting to Minas Tirith, though we might go a little bit further than that, depending on how long it takes me to get there, though I often seem to underestimate how long it takes to actually wander the roads of the game that I make. For those of you that are unfamiliar with this stream and are just joining for the first time, this is a world design focused stream where I take you through the landscapes of and dungeons of Lord of the Rings Online, talk about what goes into making those landscapes, the research we do, the implementation we do. This is not a stream to talk about things that are outside of my purview. So things like PBMP, class balance, finer details of content creation, things like lag. I am not the person to talk to about those things. So you're likely going to get me telling you to talk to someone else if those kinds of questions come up. But if you have questions about how we build the world, how we decide what to build, where we're going in the future, which I'm going to talk very, very briefly about towards the end of the stream, as well as things like housing and what we're doing with housing, what our plans are, and those sorts of things. Feel free to ask those questions here in Twitch chat. But with that in mind, oh, and one other thing, I tend to talk a lot, so I have myself a black tea and some seltzer. So if it's been a while since you've seen me take a break from talking and have a drink, let me know. It's a kind of especially important because right now southern New England is enjoying, air quotes, enjoying the smoke from the wildfires up in Canada making their way down through here. We hope everyone up in Canada who is dealing with and suffering through the fires is doing all right. So anyways, with that in mind, why don't we get started on our tour? Where we last left off, I had taken a hobbit to Isengard. Unfortunately, I had to change the character that I'm using, so I am no longer the hobbit running through Isengard. Let me uncloak myself so that we can see my character. And let me get myself to an appropriate run speed. But let's see, what do I have for horses that I can hop on to go for a ride and have? Yeah, we'll do this one. We'll do the Oryx, because why not? So let's see. We'll talk to some of the people in here. Mr. Alex says, "Hello. Can you reduce the density of frills in certain areas like Swanfleet? I don't want to completely disable them, but some areas I cannot see my character move around, and it affects the quality of the screenshots." So I think there are some places like Swanfleet and whatnot where I do think that we probably went a little heavy on some of those frills, but I think the bushes in particular are probably the greater issue. And some of the things that we've done in the past have requested kind of flatter versions of some of the bushes we have. So that might be a possible solution that we could implement for that. That said, we are in the midst of our expansion pack development cycle right now. So those kinds of changes aren't likely to happen in the near term. But it's certainly something that, especially if you were to submit a bug or suggestion on it, something that we could take a look at for the future, perhaps as a quality of life update. So here we are running away from Isengard on my Oryx in my cool Shigami outfit. And away we go. I do like that we have been kind of introducing different mount types throughout the game. I know there are a contingent of players that are not happy to see things like elks and boars and whatnot as mounts for players, but I do think having that kind of variety is helpful in terms of allowing players to kind of differentiate themselves. Like, we have a lot of horses, and while they all look great, it is nice to be able to have those kinds of different profiles, different animations. Um, is always good. You know, one of the things that I think about a lot when it comes to building out a region is the shape profiles of the creatures that you encounter going through a space. I usually try to push our design team towards making sure we have a variety of creature sizes in there. We don't want everything that's all just wolf sized. We want to make sure that we have some animals that are bigger. So you have something like a bear, or even bigger than that, a drake. We don't want to lean too heavy on having too many bipedal encounters. We like to sprinkle in animals that have flying in them just to give them a different profile, or even like little low to the ground things. So those sorts of things help to add diversity to the space beyond just how we lay out the trees, the rocks, the frills, and whatnot. And I think that holds true too to player mounts as well. Having that kind of diversity of appearance helps set up a scene that looks more interesting, looks more varied than it would otherwise be. Apologize if I cough any during this. I'm not doing too great with the smoke that's coming in right now. So, all right, we are making our way south. We are in the Heath Fells now, and we will soon be crossing over into Rohan. This is an exciting time for us in the development side of things. We've had some growing pains with the 64-bit server stuff, and some recent updates where performance wasn't where we would like it to be. But I think that from the new development stuff, we're all excited about what we're working on. I think we very recently nailed down the final name for what we're going to be calling the expansion pack in the fall, which, I missed my turn, which there will be announcements of what that final name is coming out soon. But it's nice to kind of be able to go like, okay, yeah, we know what we're calling this now. Druid's Fire says, at least you don't have con cred from Gen Con. That is always the risk of going to an event like that, whether it's Gen Con, PAX, what was once E3, all of those. There's always that risk of, it's a ton of people all in one space, so you get that risk of just coming home with a bug. I think the first time, back before we launched the game, we were doing press stuff, and I had gone with a couple of people to New York Comic Con, and I think I was out of it for about a week after the fact, because of a bug that I had picked up at the Comic Con. It's no joke at all. All right, we have made it into Rohan. The scorched remains of the battles between the Rohirrim and the Dunlendings. In the far distance, we will very soon be able to see Edoras in the distance. Once we get a little bit further, I think it's just past that ridge is when we'll see it. Xgrins, yes, this is the official Lotro stream. In case you missed my spiel at the beginning, I am a senior designer working on Lord of the Rings Online, giving a tour of the landscape that we built and talking about what goes into building it. And here we go. So, Druid's Fire says, "Oh, the glorious day when that door finally opened and let us ride through to Rohan." That is one of those things too, where it's like, I think everyone has that anticipation for every blocked gate that we put up, in the world. I think everyone sees where we've kind of ended our development and is excited about and looking forward to what's next, where we're going next. And it's all sort of tease a little bit, but it also helps imply that bigger world that, we're exploring around in. I would not be shocked if there are a number of players that are uh, patiently or impatiently waiting for that gate in the northern portions of Amberol in Ikerbon Valley to unlock, so that they can start going up into uh, Harandor. They got a little while to wait for that, but it's certainly something that I think helps build anticipation and just helps show that the world that the game is in is substantial. Yeah, I've seen a few. There have been a few videos from streamers that I've watched on YouTube. I'm not sure if they were something composed or something that was streamed, but they would be showing off Lotro, like people that don't normally play Lotro that are trying it out for the first time, and they're showing the game world, and they're first talking about like, oh hey, we're in Eriador, and oh, this is a really big area, but that's not all. And then they zoom out a level, and then you can kind of see, Eriador and Rovanian, and it's like, but that's not all. And they zoom out a little, and you have Eriador, Rovanian, Mordor, Gondor, and now Umbar and Hardwaith, and it's just the size of the game. This is the third stream now, and it's taken me at least 3 hours at developer speed to follow the path to certain areas. So it's definitely the size of it, I think, throws people off, and the fact that there's still so much more that we can build gets people excited. So here we have Edoras here in the distance. Grins, welcome to playing Lotro. I'm glad you're having fun. It's a lot of fun making the game, and it's always nice to hear, even with the game as old as it is, that there are still new people joining in, trying out the game, and enjoying it. Riri Freak says, can you by any chance give us a teeny tiny hint of what the next regions will be like? I'm not going to give any hints about what the next regions will be like, but at the end of the stream, I'm planning to talk a little bit about what our preview season is going to start looking like. And in fact, next week's Cave Troll stream is going to touch a little bit on the expansion pack, but September is really when things are going to start picking up for us. Grin says, I have 25 hours of playtime and haven't even gotten out of Staddle and Bree yet. It's funny, mentioning that. One of the videos that I was watching recently that was like, I'm going to play this for 100 hours to like give my viewers the sense of the scope of the game. And, after watching through all of that and watching this person play through the 100 hours of the gameplay, both he and myself, like internally, but he had the realization at the end of it where it's just like 100 hours is just so little. It's like only 100. There's so little of the world that you actually play through within that first 100, and it's big. It keeps going, and we keep adding to it. Alrighty, we are now passing Edoras. We're not actually going to go into Edoras here to take a look at things, because we do have our timetable, and I want to make sure that we're getting where we need to go. But it's certainly a nice view to drive by, with the peaks up in the distance. Oh, and the bird cannon. That is one little teaser I'll give for the expansion pack. We got new bird cannons. We're very excited about having new bird cannons that we can use to decorate the landscape with, something that's a little bit more regionally appropriate compared to what I think is just like a flock of sparrows, basically. Not that you can really see what the birds look like from that distance, but like animation patterns and whatnot for the effects are a little bit different. So yeah, I'm very excited about that. Actually, Alta says, and the housing neighborhood nearby has such a nice view of this too. I personally really like how the Kingstead and the Eastfold neighborhoods turned out. I know there's contention here and there about the placement of the Kingstead wood, but I think it's a great view, both from Ediverse looking out, you get a great view, and from the neighborhood looking in. The biggest thing that I think is something that when I have the time to test it more thoroughly with some engineering support is finding out whether or not the impassable barriers that are around it can come down to allow players to more freely roam through the neighborhood, through the open fields and whatnot. That has been a long-standing, want of mine. It's just going to take the right time and the right availability of the right people in order to do the testing to make sure that bringing down those walls doesn't do weird things. Let's see. Harris Devio says, that's why I love it. It reminds me of the older RPGs that are 200 300 hours of nonstop gameplay. It's one of those, MMOs in general are the kind of game where you look at your, Steam playtime, for example, or even just do a whack played. All right, where am I going here? Let's see. I'm here, so I want to go this way. Where you just look at your playtime and you're like, wow, how did so much of my time go into playing this game? And that's not that it's a bad thing. If you're having fun, you're enjoying yourself, it's not detrimental. Like, enjoy the game. Asheron's Call, I remember right before it closed, I made sure to take a screenshot of my main character that I had started way, way, way back in like 1999, and the played time was like, it was probably close to, I think, a month's worth of real time played time, which is just like mind-boggling. But and I think you can do the same in Lotro as well. But yeah, like if you're enjoying, you're engrossed, like enjoy it, be engrossed in it. Grins asks, are there any plans to modernize the world map, enable zoom features, or is it something that just isn't something that's being focused on right now? I think there is certainly an interest in finding ways to modernize our radar system, our world map system, but I also think we want to. There are current efforts to look into improving the UI in general first, and so improving the UI in general is probably a bigger priority, just so that we're not ultimately redoing work, right? Like, it wouldn't make sense to like re-engineer all the maps at their current scale and then be like, oh, okay, well now we have support for this, let's redo it all. Our biggest updates as far as maps go is we will, as we have opportunities to, go through and update the old versions of the map to a more like radar style of the map. Again, that's also a contentious point. But I think those kinds of maps are sometimes, while less immersive and thematically associated with the game, they are more useful from a gameplay perspective. So, actually, Alta says the sunrise and sunset in Kingstead is the best. I think sunrise and sunset in regions that have like broad panoramic views always hit very well in Lotro. I think we do a really great job of, you have this kind of view like we have here, where you have this panorama where you can see the sun coming up, you can see the sun coming down, and you can see the effect of it on the sky without, no offense, Pretty Mountains, but without the mountains obstructing it in any way. All right, where am I? I am here, and I need to go that way. So this region that we're running through right now, Western Rohan, is actually an area that I had very little to do with the implementation of. So it's always fun for me to go through these regions and do tours through these regions, because I'm not as deeply familiar with them as earlier regions in the game that I was very closely working in, and later regions after I came back from my hiatus from game development. So it's always fun to kind of have moments of discovery, as a designer working on these things too. It's I think there's always often expectation from the player base, or maybe not an expectation, but sort of an assumption from the player base that anyone that works on a game, any game, regardless of what the game is, whether it's working on Lotro or working on Call of Duty or anything, that if you worked on it, you know everything about it. You know every nook and cranny. You know where everything is because you worked on the game. And the reality is that's not true, right? Like, it's not really possible for anyone to know everything about any one individual person to know anything about a game that they worked on, because there's just so many different departments, so many things that are within your wheelhouse, outside of your wheelhouse. Excuse me. And so, like, for me, going through these areas, and we hit this too when we were going through Gondor, because I had no involvement in any of the Gondor regions as well. It's entertaining to be able to go through these places. Oh, I missed my turn. All right. To go through these places and have those moments of discovery as a game developer, whether it's running around the world like this, getting lost like I am right now, or even just in the tools looking at something and being like, huh, that's how they did this thing this way. That's how they did this thing that way. It's interesting. It's moments of discovery are always exciting, whether or not you are playing through them or you are kind of stumbling across them as you're actually working on the space. Let's see. Druid's Fire says they definitely leveled up the skyboxes in Kingstead or in Rohan. I think that was one of our core challenges for the art team, was to both Rohans was like, we knew we were going into these regions that their definition was heavily on big, wide open expanses. And we really wanted to make sure that the skybox was supportive of that. The idea of big, open, expansive, you know, clouds just flying across through the sky, the big blue sky everywhere, and then I think after that, going into Gondor as well, they took it one step further, and the clouds in Gondor then was also like very impressive. Um, and then we got to Umbar, and we kind of had to figure out what we were doing next for clouds and how we were going to challenge ourselves with that. And the idea of these big, puffy, billowy clouds for the coastal regions just felt really good. Kixel says, "Where am I going? Literally me every time I play games." Um, and sometimes that's good and fun. Sometimes that is okay, this is an issue with the gameplay of the space if you feel like you have to, ask that question all the time. All right, we are now in the Beacon Hills. That went much faster than I thought it was going to be. Here we are. We are now in the Beacon Hills, slowly working our way across here. All right. With a slightly more defined road, so hopefully I won't get too lost in the process of all of this. Let's see. Druid's Fire says, one of my favorite Blizz devs was hardcore into Asheron's Call and frequently cites it as a game that he misses the most. I miss it a lot too. There's a lot of nostalgia associated with it, and honestly, a lot of the game systems in it are really like, I felt like the loot system was something that you had to work with and was extensible, and it really involved crafting, and it was part of a generation where you could have a generation of games where you could have someone who was the best at something, and the value of being the best at something is now you have a community either aspiring to achieve the same levels of skill at something as you that you have, or you have people coming to you looking for support. Um, things like I'm the best tinkerer or crafter, and because I'm the best at that, people want to come to you to get your help in updating their weapons or updating their armor, those sorts of things. And I thought that's a really compelling personal journey for a player, right? To feel like like it gives a sense of mastery. And I think modern games, it's a little bit harder to feel that sense of mastery. Like the niches for that sense of mastery are less frequent. Um, yeah. Whimsy and nostalgia and all that good stuff. Uh, so actually, Alta says, "Do you know where the Three Bears house is around there? Probably no time for detour, but you're kind of close." I don't know specifically where it is, but I have stumbled across it while playing through those regions. Harris Debio says, "I end up coming back to the game after a few years away from the game, and over the last 15 years, occasional gameplay. Uh, I loved how everything has evolved." I think that's, from a world building perspective, I think that's something that we've really striven for, is to evolve how we build the landscape, how we approach making contiguous spaces feel natural in how they abut each other, how they go from one to the next to the next. um, yeah, I think there's still a bit of theme park in our biome design, but I feel like it's a more natural feeling progression between them. Whereas in the original game, it was very much just like, and here's the hard line, and now you're in savanna territory after having been in this lush green Breland kind of thing. Um, all right. Let's see. We have Rayvon Lunatic says, "Just came back myself and working through the updated areas, Angle, Swans, Fleet, Yondershire, and having fun." Glad you're having fun. I think, and Rayvon says, "I want more Moria, dank large caves." Well, get yourself to Gundabad, and you will have plenty of those uh, to contend with there as well, as well as the instance cluster that came along with where dragons dwell with Arid Mithrin. A lot of those are big cavey spaces. Um, I think the nice thing about, you had mentioned the Angle and Swanfleet and Yondershire. I think the thing that's important about those regions is the alternative play that they offer, right? Like, you don't have to go through the Yondershire your first playthrough. You can save that for another character to run through. The benefit of all of those regions is they exist as a side story that you can partake in if you've already leveled up your characters a few times and you really don't want to do base troll shaws again. You don't want to do base barrow downs again. You have options, and I think that's important for a game of this age to have, especially when thinking about ways to encourage people to engage in low level play again. Having those alternatives is a way to encourage low level play, without it feeling too much like a chore. Uh, so uh, so now we have Ravelin Loisto says, "Have you noticed mysterious blue squares on the ground on Rohan next to Aworth?" I actually just fixed that bug. I don't know why, but for some reason, a texture from Gundabad had filled into a couple of land blocks there. So there was that weird blue going on. So that has been fixed. That fix should go into effect when we launch the expansion pack. It's not something that we've branched into our current live build, so it'll be a little while before it's actually fixed. But it has been fixed, and the fix will be in eventually, into the game world eventually. So Grin says, when you are traversing the map like this, are you looking for certain things that stick out to take back to the dev team? Not really. Like, traversing around like this is more for me to have some, quality time with you all. Hang out, chat. Right now, my server is a little unhappy with me. It is moving a little slow. And this area in general is something that is a project of mine to improve. It is a very asset-heavy area. As you can see, the server, like, took a little while for me to load the near terrain and whatnot. Granted, this is a non-release server, so it's playing a little bit slower because it's doing a bunch of logging stuff in the background, so that when asserts and perf issues come up, we have those logs. I know what's going on here. It is the many, 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 many tent sites and campfires and sleeping bags and whatnot that are here. So I have some work that's in the way to kind of help with this space in particular, to help it be a little bit more performant. I just need to have some artist time freed up to combine a bunch of assets for me. And so in the meantime, my local server is not super happy, but that's expected. Jim Nanny says, Gundabad is by far one of my favorite areas. I'm glad you enjoyed that. I think Gundabad was really meant to be us taking a look at what was successful about Moria, what was challenging about Moria, and trying to create Moria 2. Hold on, I might need to do some shenanigans. So where am I now? I'm here. All right. I'm going to see about shenaniganing myself over this. Whee! Let's see if this works. There we go. Gundabad was really a evaluation of Moria, us looking at what we felt like we did right, what we felt like we did wrong, and trying to find ways to, alleviate some of the issues that we ran into with Moria. I think the biggest one was, Moria, at least at launch, was very tiring to players, right? Like they spent an entire expansion cycle in caves. We let them out into Lothlorien shortly afterwards, but then kicked them back into Moria again for more endgame stuff. And, I think that amount of time inside was very oppressive to players. So with Gundabad, we really wanted to make sure that we had a mixture of interior and exterior spaces, so that you were kind of moving through the region itself, but not feeling like you were trapped and oppressed in the region. And I think we did that fairly successfully with Carbronach and the Welkin Lofts, as well as having the caves within Gundabad themselves be more varied in the height, right? Like you weren't always seeing just the ceiling of the caves; you were seeing more beyond that. So I think we were fairly successful in that. Oh, drink liquid. Let's see. We're going to do some tea. There we go. Harris Devio says, that's what I love about DDO Notro is the freedom of being able to choose your own adventure. I think we still have the tracks to follow with the storyline, and the game generally plays best when you follow along the storyline, because that's your connective tissue from region to region, right? Like your epic story, whether it is the original Shadows of Angmar story, or the Black Book of Mordor, or the Song of Waves and Wind that we're going through now, that's how you're going to learn how to move through the world. Um, but then once you've achieved the main narrative story, you have all of these regions that are just kind of like open and free for you to move around in. And I think that that feels good. You know, I think the narrative, the main story, is kind of your pressure, your impetus to move forward, but it's not so heavy of a pressure that you can't stop and, you know, take a break, wander around, explore, see the world how you want to approach it, as opposed to um, blitzing through it. So Argaled says, "Will we ever get a overland road to Umbar?" I don't want to say never. It is not something that is in our immediate future, but I think, you know, we know the landscape that is in between Gondor and Umbar. South Gondor, Harandor, Damarzag, I think is what the Umbarim call it. Um, so we know what route we need to take to get there. Um, I don't think we have any immediate uh, intentions for it, but someday, one day. Oh, what happened? Nope. There we go. I do not need a screen grab. Thank you. One day, eventually, that region will be added. Whether that is a year from now, 10 years from now, who knows? But I think that there will be an opportunity for that space to be filled in. Raviolin Loista says, unpopular opinion maybe, but I enjoyed the Druidane Forest a lot. Always trust the Woes' pathways. I think that is, from a forest perspective, a great space. From a gameplay perspective, I can see how it can be frustrating. You know, it definitely has some shades of the Trollshaws in it, where if you go the wrong way, like you're going the wrong way. I have spent time in there just kind of brute forcing my way through, where it's just like, yeah, I will destroy my knees jumping off of this cliff, but this is faster than following the Woes paths. Uh, any plans for more chicken runs? I've never run a chicken run. One of the things I was thinking about, especially now that I've explored all of the regions in the game through these streams, you know, that was one of the things. Oh, we need to increase the far view on that sucker. One of the things that you know, I was trying to think of is like what topics, what themes can I do these casual stroll streams in that hasn't really been done yet. And you know, that's where I came up with the idea of doing the roads. Eventually, I'm also going to want to do the rivers of Middle Earth. So we'll follow what rivers we've built, and we've got a bunch that are fairly substantial rivers at this point. You know, the Anduin alone is probably at least 2 streams worth of exploration. And so then after that, thinking about like what other styles of streams can be done, and thinking along the lines of, well, Bull Roar's up and running, maybe we do something that's more community oriented. You know, escort scenario to this location, that location, and keep them alive, kind of things. Everyone says, never thought to jump in the water and just swim. You can just swim through a lot of it. Once you get to the Falls of Rauros is where it becomes challenging, because we do have some impassables there between that and Eastfold and Beacon Hills and whatnot. You kind of have to run next to the river. You can't necessarily get in it. But the river itself, the full path is there, even if it is not playable or accessible. You know, and there are certainly some areas around it where we've thought about doing fill in the gap regions. So there is no shortage of potential at that point. All right, this day file is nice and gloomy, but we are almost to Minas Tirith, and I still have 20 minutes to go. So I might continue on from here. We'll get to Minas Tirith itself, and then we'll leave it up to you all to decide which route through Gondor we want to go. Whether or not we want to go through the pre-war or through the Pelennor battle version, or if we want to switch over to King's Gondor version. So once I get to Minas Tirith, we'll make that decision. If anyone in chat has a preference, please let me know. Original Gondor or King's Gondor. Let me know, and that's the path that we'll take to continue along these roads. Don't all speak up all at once. All right. We are almost to one of our many versions of Minas Tirith. I think this Minas Tirith and Helm's Deep we have a ridiculous number of copies of for different story purposes. All right, so it seems like most people, the few responses seem to lean more towards King's Gondor. So once we get to Minas Tirith, that's when I will move us over into the King's Gondor version of the region. The not depressing Gondor. Well, there are parts of Gondor it's not depressing, but I think one of the benefits too of doing King's Gondor is it will more easily give us access to Anfalos and Penethgelen eventually when we get there. So, all right, so that decision is easily made. This isn't quite your department, I guess, but the sheer size of the Mumakil on Pelennor, including the one who has a warband, is amazing. It really makes them feel like a threat, not like you're picking on a circus elephant. It is amazing, but also a very challenging experience from a gameplay perspective, at least. All right, let's see. We're gonna travel there. Just because the size of it, big creatures on open landscape, they're not the best when it comes to navigating that landscape, because our landscape is really meant for humanoid-ish sized things, and so I think this is the right version. Let me dismount and look. Yes, this is. All right. Get back on my high horse, and we'll keep going as far as we can in the last 15 minutes that we have. Let's. There we go. Happy Gondor. It's a wedding. Oh, wait, this isn't the one I want. Where do I want to go? Let's... Boop. And... Why don't I... Aldonorian... King's Gondor. Why don't I just boop myself here? This way, I don't have to worry about figuring out which version of what I need to be in. Mumakil mounts. Will we ever see them? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Who knows? So welcome to the Harland. We'll run up this way a little bit, just so you can kind of see what's going on where. And I think this, what version are we in here? R4. All right. Because Midsummer Minas Tirith is its own little private island. So you can see Minas Tirith up there in the distance. That's where we would have been running down from. But this is Happy Gondor. This is Mountains in Shadow Gondor, I think, is region 4. But Mumakil mounts, I don't want to say never, but probably unlikely unless they're like teacup Mumakil. Um, and Harris Devio says, "Will we ever get to see Gimli's glittering caves?" I wouldn't be shocked if we spent a little bit of time in places like that um, once we've started progressing certain characters beyond where they're at right now. A lot of characters are um, locked at Minas Tirith post battle right now. You know, post wedding, and they're just kind of like waiting for their next step, right? And Gimli's Glittering Caves is many steps further down from that. Um, but there may be opportunities for flashbacks, flash forwards, like those sorts of things. Who knows? The future is wild and crazy and out there. This was a fun region to reimagine. You know, I feel the rebuilding King's Gondor is one of those regions where, like, on paper, it didn't look like it was going to be the amount of work that it ultimately ended up being. Um, Girins, you do get to Mordor as part of the game. Right now, the current where the characters are in the game narrative, the major characters like Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, they are all kind of in and around the wedding of Aragorn and Arwen. So that's where they are narratively. Um, Read into that how you will. All right, we're continuing on here. Oh, and the chat room booted me and brought me back. Hey, chat room, welcome back. But yeah, as I was saying, like the King's Gondor regions are areas that on paper didn't feel like they were going to be as big of a lift as they were. But there were a lot of opportunities in redoing the work, redoing these regions. There were a lot of opportunities to modernize how we had designed things. And, you know, unfortunately, a lot of that modernization didn't come back to the original the original Gondor regions. And maybe someday they will. But it was kind of a nice, like, fresh take on these. You know, like the seasons have progressed, so what the landscape looks like with the flowers and grasses and trees that are being used here is different than what original Gondor had going for it. And I think that's something that we've shown glimpses of before, of, you know, alternate versions of regions, and I think King's Gondor is an example of how we can really show what a region would look like as it has progressed in the story. You know, what changes happen in the world. All right, we are coming up on Pelargir now. We are just booking it. We got 10 minutes left. We might be able to make it. How about we aim here for Lynn here? We'll aim for Lynn here to end the stream. And that's kind of an appropriate place to end too, because that's where King's Gondor Part 1, which is what we're in right now, kind of ended, and players couldn't go any further. So I think King's Gondor Part 1 is a good endpoint for this. Harris Devio brings up one of our favorite boogeymen of Lotro in talking about the scourging of the Shire. You know, we've talked before about kind of what the scourging of the Shire would mean as far as the story goes and the gameplay goes, and it's still there is a decent amount of time between the wedding and the scourging, even though there's stuff happening in the background with Saruman that isn't really talked about until the scourging. But there's like stuff in motion, stuff happening. Pelargir was fun to rebuild because it was just like, what ruins can I prop up with braces, and let's clean up the ground. I think one of the biggest things that I was happy about in working on Pelargir is changing over a lot of the walkable surfaces to actual terrain to walk around on, as opposed to what they were before, which was like just platforms and platforms and platforms, and that like can be a little detrimental to asset count. And it also like keeps us from having like nice detailed work going on the landscape, which we can paint if it's terrain, but we can't do that if it's an object. So it just helps the ground feel more like it should. So ED7, is there any new info on housing that you'd be able to share? So right now, our focus, once primary development on the expansion pack is complete, is going to quickly shift over to working on getting Rivendell housing ready to go. We've got the primary landscape for that done, and I think some hook placement and whatnot, but overall it needs like setup work, the interiors need to be built. So that is the goal and the direction once our work, the world work on the expansion pack is done, is getting getting our next neighborhood up and running. I think we have a few other ideas and features that we are hoping to tinker a little bit on in relation to housing over the course of the next several months as well. I don't have any specific information about those because they still need to like get in the hands of our engineers and get scheduled and whatnot. So we don't really want to talk too much about those until that aspect is available, that we know that it's going to be underway. And then outside of that, I've got a slate of a few hundred new housing items coming up that are being made now. Whether or not all of them go into the expansion pack or some of them are held off, there's a ton of new housing items that are going to be coming out over the next several months, starting with the expansion pack as well. So there's a lot of good stuff there. And then, we start looking forward to what our next housing offering is going to be. Some of it, may be a new, like, traditional style neighborhood, like a new premium style neighborhood, rather. Or there may be other things that we're able to spin up depending on what we have for available engineering time. So Ravon says, any thoughts on carryalls for rep tokens and crafting scrolls? My thoughts on that are that would be something that a game systems designer would need to chime in on. It's outside of my purview. Druid's Fire says, I'm all for more work for Yao to put on his site. And I know, speaking of Yao, we should be, I'm currently figuring out with him what the timing for the annual Deco Demu housing interview is going to be like. Every year for the last several years, myself and a couple other Lotro devs have done a interview with Yao and for his website to kind of cover housing stuff, what our plans are, just generally answering questions and talking about kind of what our retrospective of the past year has been. So, that should be coming up soon as well. We just gotta, one of the things that's on my plate after the stream, in fact, is to take a look at my schedule and see what my availability is to do that. So, so we are closing in on Lynn here, and I did promise to talk a little bit about the upcoming preview season. So as we make our way into Lynn here, I'll pivot over onto that. So as you may have heard, there is this little thing called an expansion pack coming out this fall. And as we have the last couple of years, kind of September is going to mark the beginning of our preview season for that. So next week, Orion and myself have our monthly We Have a Cave Troll stream. The theme for that is going to be talking about what goes into making an expansion pack or just an update in general, what our pre-production process looks like. So there might be some little tidbits here and there talking about what specifically is going on in the expansion pack, but it's not going to be an expansion pack, or it's not going to be focused specifically on what our next expansion pack is. So there might be, like I said, little tidbits here and there. So feel free to join in to learn a little bit more on that front. And then starting in September, we're going to be hitting the floor running. I think I have about 2 months worth of weekly streams coming up throughout September and October, showing off what's coming up for the next expansion pack. I think we'll kick off the month with just another stream like this. The first week in September will be our regularly scheduled Casual Stroll. The week after that will be kind of our preview season kickoff with our We Have a Cave Troll expansion pack edition stream, where Orion and I will talk a little bit more specifically about the details of what's coming out with the expansion pack. And then after that, we're just going to roll into our weekly streams. I will be doing one region a week. There are going to be 4 regions that we're going to be previewing, so each one will get that. And then depending on timing, availability, and whatnot, we may also do a 5th stream that's related to the instances and interiors of it. And then depending on what my schedule looks like, shortly after the launch of the expansion pack, I will do another cartography of blah stream like I had done last year with the cartography of Shagana. I'll do another one similar to that for what we released with the expansion pack. It will have a name other than blah associated with it, because the region does have an overarching name for it. I'm not mentioning any names specifically right now because I want to wait a little bit for that. So yeah, so that's where we're at with our plans and thoughts and schedules for everything. We have arrived at the gates into Linhir from Doran Ernil in King's Gondor. So I think this is a good spot for us to park it. And we'll come back here next month, the beginning in September, for that first week in September, to do the second half of King's Gondor, moving on into Outer Gondor, and see if we can't end the stream in Pinnithgalen, way up in the north. So in the meantime, thank you everyone for hanging out here. Like I said, next week we have a Cave Troll stream where we're going to be focusing on what pre-production for a update and expansion pack looks like. Also, don't forget that every Friday, the normal schedule for Court of the Rings, Friday at noon, where he does his lunchtime stream, will be there as well. And just keep an eye on Discord and on the message boards and social media for any announcements associated with Lotro in general, the expansion pack in specific. We are rapidly approaching the period of time where we're going to be hitting a lot of news really quickly. So please, please, please feel free to keep an eye on those things as well. So thank you everyone for coming by, hanging out, asking your questions, and overall just enjoying the game. It's always a pleasure chatting with you all and seeing what makes you excited about Lotro. Landscape makes me excited about it. So have a great one, everyone, and we'll see you all next week, and we have a Cave Troll.